It's like a motherfucker want to skip the knowing of Jesus Christ. Look at your neighbor and say, it's like a motherfucker want to skip the knowing of Jesus Christ. You need to understand something here. There are many different things in this world that I like to do. As in, go out, be in small social settings, listening to music, and getting acquainted with similar gold-minded people who know how to behave themselves. Say, look at your neighbor and say, it's like a motherfucker trying to skip the knowing of Jesus Christ. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. As for those, continue. Those are sleepless nights that are upon you. You should understand that not only are you being looked for upon me, you are very inviting to me. To show thyself as a fortitude and ladication is to have thrown hands in a lookful crowd of approachers. To have such things on your mind at a time like this will be the beseeching of the concubine of Thora, a heartless striper from the Middle Eastern dance house. Look at your neighbor and say, it's like somebody is trying to skip the knowing of Jesus Christ. There were many dark templed attributes to my father's house. But as I wandered into the footsteps of rain, there I found a woman who will birth the daughter of my brethren. She is a known fashion designer slash model who is a nurturer of love. Look at your neighbor and say, you look like someone. To Marcus, to remind your third party of your fortitude and ladication is to simply be aware to budget your spending on the damsels that are sent from the Millicopter territory. Look at your neighbor and say, you look like someone. It's more so to arrange flowers in the shape of an organ symbol. Is to have thoughts of doing your very best. To have arranged decorative ornaments hanging from the brass poles of a king-size bed is to have wandered off with a concubine of Thora, the striper from the Middle Eastern dance attire hall. Look at your neighbor and say, you look like someone. Understand me when I say this. The most will learn what it truly means to me when I say I'm done with those. Simply because I'm moving forward in life to a place where there is to a point of no return. Look at your neighbor and say, it's like somebody trying to skip the knowing of Hezekiah knows. Y'all, you'll understand soon when I say to remember that slapping me in front of my face and in front of millions is to acknowledge that you are running from hurt. Now, we've ran from hurt. Somebody hurt your feelings. I'm done talking to you. I don't want to talk to you ever again. You can go ahead and you can go to hell, kids. You can go ahead. We've ran from hurt. We've ran from hurt. We've ran from hurt. That is something that has happened before. Look at your neighbor and say, you ran from hurt. Look at your neighbor and say, you look like someone. Look at your neighbor and say, you ran from hurt. That's something that we can acknowledge and come to the conclusion that, we have ran from hurt. You probably was with somebody or something, and, they wasn't doing you too good. You probably was with somebody like, you want to know something? You cheating on me or something. I'm getting the vibes of, some type of cheater, some type of cheaterization. It's myself like, we've ran from hurt before. Look at your neighbor and say, you look like someone. The more that continues to run, you'll see how much I care for only myself. To lose interest and feelings for somebody who was damn near everything to me at a point in time is to be concluded as an offspring. To think that I would allow such bitch to inquire about what I see in her, and then turn around and be at the gas station with another such bitch, would simply state the obvious of what I will really do to your ass. You will learn to change your way of speaking to me. Look at your neighbor and say, you look like someone. I'm not compared to most young people. I'm just against myself. To separate is to show separation anxiety. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, you look like someone. To be forgiven from spaces to have learned lessons from the entry of the concubine and Hezekiah. You shouldn't do that while I'm speaking simply because something horrid will happen. To be conscious is to be overhanded. To forget your gender is to have simply played around with yourself at strange times. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, you look like someone. Don't go to the computer. Get pep products. Don't even look at me. Just write to me and you will understand the truth about yourself. Listen here. Listen to your mama. Listen to the children of the corn. To accept flaws and alls will slap hands with Beyonce. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, you look like someone. To understand, to get the fuck off me, will understand that most won't happen simply because at a young age, you thought it was okay. You thought it was okay for people to be slapping me in my face. You thought it was okay for people to be jumping up on me. You thought it was okay for, people you thought it was okay for the son of David to take his foot and stomp me to the ground while I was 10 shillings. You thought it was okay for, the son of David to, put his hands on me. You thought it was okay for that type of things to happen. So at a very young age, I want you to look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, you look like someone. To understand that most won't happen, simply, you thought it was okay to pacify that type of shit. It's okay. Long as hell. But you should understand that to have thought of being of a turmoil group of bitches would mean that you thought that I needed you. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, someone is trying to skip the knowing of Hezekiah knows. I said, hell no. To know thyself, to know yourself, is to have already been written. To hear sounds of the pathetic in most that reside there is to have knowledge that most people don't know what a significant other is. And those come from a jealous bitch who's thirsty for protection from that man. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, most people don't know what a significant other is. Again, most people don't know what a significant other is. I'm gonna tell you, what it really is what I said. What it really is what I said. Most people don't know what a significant other is. These people have decided to lash themselves to me. These people have decided to lash themselves. Oh yeah. Most people don't know what a significant other is. Because guess what? You will understand to not be so given to a group of people who really don't even know who you are. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, most people don't know what a significant other is. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, most people don't know what a significant other is. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, most people won't even take the time or take the consideration to actually say to themselves an affirmation in the morning. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, most people won't even take the time to be considerate to themselves to actually protect the daughter of the concubine striper. Some people won't even take into the consideration to actually look at that neighbor and say, neighbor, you look like someone. You'll understand soon that to take from my childhood is to have been some type of tax write-off from a yellow-headed Philistine. Now the yellow-headed Philistines, those are alive. Those are alive. The yellow-headed Philistines are alive. I've seen those. To have been some type of tax write-off from a yellow-headed Philistine, to exceed with some type of responsibility is to recognize that I'm simply what they aren't. To compare yourself to someone that runs from you is the reason why most conform to identify you as an officer. To behave in a way that is undescribable at the moment is to recognize that the sounds that you are hearing are from the space shuttle that you climbed in when you were just a small young woman. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, that is a tax write-off from a yellow-headed Philistine. To be demonized is to have been possessed once before. To allow possession is to have seen a product of the devil. To feed from an entity of the concubine's mistress of Prince Darrell is to have awoken a tainted spirit. To have no recollection of your entities that are in the preservation log is to notice a thief in the presence. To log into the preservation box is to want knowledge of you are. To give knowledge of yourself is to have been from an enchanted rainforest on the Somalian Hooded River. To go into the preserve, to seek knowledge, is to be of the chance of a mulleted confession. To give off warning shot of destiny is to have taken heed to show yourself. To animalize yourself because of how someone sounds is to recognize that you are a voice over character. To proceed to intrude is to have forgotten who the fuck I was. More so like you're mad because you need to find yourself. To understand the attacks is to have resembled pieces of pleasure throughout a temple of the Yahtzee. She too can be a misplaced piece of the treasure that is being watched by the second season of Love and Hip Hop China. To be jealous of your own son's misintended adventure is to be of the city of Nadej, a dark-rooted, castle-like structured village. Be cautious, for a lot is at stake. Be more gentle, for you should know that it is definitely. Also know that if you don't know me, it's simply because you get. My feelings are real, so are yours. But you need to know the difference. To have knowledge of oneself is to have been apart from the tainted spirit. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, you look like someone. Show mercy, for thou knowest of the parallels that fill this world, and tend to play soccer in an open field. Show your different umbrella, for thou knowest of the unrighteousness. To be Fort Worth is to be of a willing man. To be prestigious is to have toenails of the Mongolian princess Tuliper. To make thyself noticeable is to be of the son of Thora, the striper who was sent to Hezekiah in the dance hall. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, you look like someone. The outskirts and plain fields is where I'll be subsiding. Understand that maximum wage shall be of 3 shillings and a bucket of tools. To understand is to have own house soon. To be of preparation is to understand that you are of needed attention. Understand me when I say this. Don't bully me simply because you need to understand that was a feature on your song. Don't bully me because you feel some type of way towards me and I said no, as in that's not my husband. Understand me when I say most will learn from a pharmaceutical instead of me, simply because you're going to learn that wasn't me. Continue running for the middle-aged consumers, but reality is I saw most at a very young age. Someone look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, you look like someone. To fight for me in the spiritual realm is to have words of encouragement for me. Okay. To have 10 to 13 females run up on me and still remain thyself is to be from prayer warriors. To recognize that she is living is to proceed to remain. To understand that I am simply thou art that is in heaven is to show specific modifications of reconciliation. Understand me when I say write out to understand yourself. To be cordial in a humpback is to notice that something very important has happened. To argue with me and say that I am others because you're in denial about certain things is to be from the helicopter territory. Don't bully me simply because you need to understand that was a feature on your song. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, you have strong features. Marriage is some type of commitment that most people aren't really ready for. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, you don't know yourself. Marriage is some type of commitment that most people really aren't ready for. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, you aren't sure of how you arrived in a place. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, the parallels of the world want to see you at your downfall. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, that's not me. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, it's more so of like this. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, feelings passed along from evil dwellers. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, you're really just mad because you tried to take me down and I simply cut. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, you look like someone. Marriage is some type of commitment that most people are not ready for. To many, to marry someone important is to simply understand that your significant other is a major part of you. Understand that you should care about your significant other because those feelings pass along to someone who might need help in a very serious situation. Being caring, kind, and gentle are three major feelings or characteristics that will actually help you in the long run. To actually care about someone, you have to have very strong feelings for them. To have very strong feelings for someone you care about is all more of the reasons to want to marry someone. To have insignificant thoughts of me is to have simply lost track of who I am. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, you don't want to lose track. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, you don't want to lose track of who I am. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, I haven't lost track. I haven't lost track of who I am. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, you look like someone. To have insignificant thoughts of me is to have simply lost track of who I am. More reasons for me to be as reserved as I am. Simply because most people don't understand that I'm going through a spiritual battle. See, most people don't know that you're going through a... You could be walking out and say, hey, y'all. Most people don't really know that we are going through a spiritual battle. You go to work, you go to work, you go to church, oh yeah, this like that. You are going through a spiritual battle. Excuse me. Most people don't know that you're going through a spiritual battle. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, you look like someone. To have some type of connection between the ancestors would mean that you are of the enlightened ones. You will understand some, excuse me, you will understand soon that most motherfuckers are hard of hearing. You will understand soon that most motherfuckers feel some type of way simply because they're on the market. Most bitches feel some type of way because I just simply said what the fuck I said. So all of those are literally nothing to me. Understand me when I say motherfuckers need to understand that you don't. It's what you don't. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, they tried to unplug my resistance. They tried to unplug me from the unplug. They tried to unplug me. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, you look like someone. You are simply what the fuck was said. No, your ass has simply been outspoken like enough. You feel certain ways because that is in the category of a lead. Understand me when I say I can hear all of those. I can hear every last single one of those. I can hear them all. Every last single one of them. To have thoughts of a killer would mean that you don't love me. To block yourself from love would mean that you are non-existing. To think that love wouldn't fight back would mean that you all must have thought I was what was said. To have Abundant Life Missionary Baptist Church is to remember who she really is. Be courageous and outgoing, for I know most run from what has happened. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, you look like someone.